Hello, Ollie.
Hi there. I need you because have you accepted the Teams invite yet? Because I don't see you on the Teams.
No, I'm struggling here
We
to.
haven't got a Teams invite. This is the problem.
No, you want? I think you did because you accepted it already, so it will be in your calendar.
Everybody here?
Good luck for this afternoon.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Connell. We have Mr. Winter
We
remotely.
think we have. Apologies for the slight delay, which is due to some technical issues.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Winter. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, fine. Good afternoon. Yes, I can see you fine.
Right. We, or at least I can't hear you.
Right. Okay.
Certainly sounds better.
Things seem okay this end. I don't know
Right.
why.
Right. I think we can hear you clearly. Now,
Okay.
as you understand, you're about to be asked questions by Mr. Connell, but before then, I understand you're prepared to take the affirmation.
Yes. Fine.
Sitting where you are, can I ask you to repeat these words after me? I solemnly, sincerely, and truly
I solemnly, sincerely, and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Winter. Now, I don't know how long your evidence will take, but if at any stage you want to take a break, just give me an indication and we'll take a break.
Fine. Thank you very much.
I'll now hand you over to Mr. Connell.
Good afternoon, Mr. Winter,
Good afternoon.
and thank you for making yourself available to assist, which is appreciated by the inquiry. There is no issue if anything happens to the technology. If your technological assistant who is lurking in the background wishes to help out, it's been made clear that that's happening and no one is taking any issue with that. So please feel free to avail yourself of that assistance in the event that it's required.
Thank you.
Now, for the purposes of the inquiry, you have produced a witness statement. Have you got access to that?
Yes, it's here in front of me.
Okay, thank you very much. I might use it just as a guide as we work through the issues. I'm not going to ask you about everything that's in there, but it may help us just understand where we are at any time. Now, I need to ask you then the formal question that I ask all the witnesses, which is, are you content to adopt the witness statement as part of your evidence in this inquiry?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, as I think may be clear to you by now, Mr. Winter, that the purpose of asking you to give evidence is because there were a number of steps taken of different kinds to, shall we say, to introduce a resource to this project, which wasn't internal originally to the Health Board. There are some other advisors we've been asking about, and we've been keen to look at all of these to see how they were intended to work and how they did work, and you're in that box. I see from the first page of your witness statement, I'm just looking at paragraph 1, that I think you should have page numbers at the top of each page as well, which are the ones that we use here electronically. So it's an electronic page 71, or page 1 of your witness statement. You were with Balfour Beatty, is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
At the same company that was bidding to build the hospital?
Yes, I believe it was, but I'd left Balfour Beatty obviously quite a time before that.
All right. Is it 2005, I think you'd left, is that right? I think that's what it says in your statement.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years I've been retired now.
Okay, thank you. The first point I just wanted to ask you was this, that on that first page, you say that during your time there, in about the middle of the page, you say in the latter stages of this employment, the Balfour Beatty Group became involved in the delivery of hospitals via the PFI route, and then you list a number of hospitals that the company was involved with during your time. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Now, did you, in the course of your role, become familiar at all with the special requirements that were imposed, the rules and regulations around what was required for building a hospital as opposed to building an office block or a shed?
Yeah, we always viewed hospitals as one of the more difficult kind of projects to take on.
Right.
It always was difficult to hand them over to get them complete, and it was complete, because the testing and inspection regimes were multiple, and it took a long time to get a product. So you're always delighted when you manage to hand it over, because that was a big achievement.
There is a suite of guidance documents, sometimes called SHTM, with various numbers following, which were used for hospitals. Were you familiar with these at all?
Familiar might be taking it too far. I knew of the existence of, I think it's HTMs.
Yes.
But that's what we called them back then. So that is a very detailed specification that applied to hospitals. Yep.
Yeah, I think, and as this inquiry knows, HTMs are the English ones and SHTMs are the Scottish.
Most of our hospitals were down south.
Right. So you were familiar with the idea, but not perhaps with the detail. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Did you, when you first became involved in the Glasgow Hospital, the new Glasgow Hospital, did you have any understanding about whether the requirement was to build that hospital in accordance with the SHTM guidance?
No, that was never discussed that I can recall by anyone with me.
On the first page of your statement, you say you were interviewed by the chairman, Mr. Robertson, two others. His names don't matter for present purposes, so we needn't worry about that. And then you say it was explained the board was about to embark on major construction expenditure, but the board didn't have any experience in construction.
Yeah.
That's what you've narrated there, correct?
Yeah, that's what I recall the meeting was. Yeah.
And if the board didn't have any experience in construction, were you given to understand where that construction experience would be found, that would be available to help the board build the hospital?
Well, as far as I can recall, the chairman and the other two gentlemen put it to me that there's been a history of major projects being reported on programme, on budget, and then 3 months before the end, it's suddenly announced they're now a year behind and millions over budget. And they didn't want that to happen in this case. They wanted to ensure that what was being reported by their project manager reflected what was happening on the site. That if he was reporting on programme, that I agreed with that, so that there were no shocks to come to the board. So it was the board's project manager who reported to the board.
Well, I'm going to ask you about the board's project managers in a little while. If I can just stick to page 1 of your statement at the moment. You say the chair explained he wanted someone who could give an independent view of progress and cost, challenge the construction team if necessary. Now, can you just help His Lordship and the chair understand what you mean by challenge? What's involved in that?
The question their view on progress, their view on costs. I visited the site about once a month, spent some time with the consultant, and from memory, I think it was Curry and Brown, maybe it wasn't. spent some time with them, reviewing the programmes, discussing progress and costs. Then sat with Alan for some time, discussing his view, had a walk around the site. He went back into the office and then again discussed with Alan how he felt the job was, and what he would be reporting to the board. And I satisfied myself that what he was reporting was a genuine reflection on what was happening on site.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask you, because challenge suggests not accepting what you're told just at face value, but doing some more digging around. Is that fair?
Yeah, it wasn't a case of the project manager saying to me, we're on programme, that's it, end of story. As I say, I sat for maybe an hour or 2 hours with two gentlemen, and I can't remember their names. And I say, I think the company was Curry and Brown, looking at progress, marked up programmes. They gave me programmes to take away, so I could then get their view on progress, walk around the site and see if it married up with what they were saying. Check with Alan if he was in agreement with what they were saying and what he was about to report. So
Is that Alan Seaborn you're mentioning there?
Yes, it was Alan Seaborn about it, yeah.
To enable you to carry out this job of not accepting what you've been told at face value, can you remember whether you did any preparation, any looking at contract documents or any other materials?
No, I was never part of my brief, as I understood it, in practice, was not to examine any documentation, but was to overview progress on site, costs on site, and satisfy myself that what was being reported was accurate. But it wasn't a forensic analysis to go into any particular aspect of the job. It was a high-level overview.
The particular contract type here was a design and build contract under a contract form called NEC 3.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, can you remember, were you familiar with operating under an NEC 3 contract?
No, NEC on, I think on the majority of contracts we did in my working life were not under NEC 3. That came towards the very end of my working experience. Although design and build became much more prevalent in later years.
Again, just so we're clear as to what you were or were not doing, because that will be helpful to us in understanding your evidence. Right at the foot of that page of your witness statement, you say you met the board site team along with their appointed project managers and you were carrying out a site inspection. Now,
yeah.
If you're carrying out a site inspection, what are you using as your yardstick? What are you checking against if you don't have the contract materials?
Okay, well, I think after 40 years experience in managing and running projects from small to very big, you gain a certain expertise or knowledge, which you must do at a high level management in construction, to walk around a project and assess broadly how things are going, how is progress. If I've been told that the cladding is 50% complete, when I walk around, does it look like it's 50% complete? Not that every nut and bolt is in the right place, but just generally, does it look like what's being reported? That can be concrete, it can be installation of partitions, electrical work. But I think it's just, I don't know anyone who would have the knowledge to walk around the job and assess everything from concrete work to electrical work and ventilation work. It's a total overview of the project, which is how we manage jobs. You have a manager at the top who takes a complete overview and managers underneath dealing with all the specialist bits and pieces of the project.
Now, if we go on to the next page of your witness statement, so that's 72 in the electronic numbering at the top, page 2 of your hard copy statement. where you say this kind of thing that you were doing was not dissimilar to what you did during your working life. I just wanted to ask you this, if you were doing this kind of thing during your working life as a senior executive of the Balfour Beatty Group, what were you looking for? Were you looking for things that might damage your balance sheet or scare the financial press, or what kind of things were you trying to put your finger on?
Well, I think the principal thing, if you're managing a company who at any one time you might have 50 or 100 different contracts on the go, you've got to, at some level, a senior manager like myself would visit individual jobs. You've got a good understanding of the capabilities of the management on that site. Your primary aim is to ensure you complete a job on time and to the required budget. These are always the primary aims. There are lots of other subsidiary issues, the publicity and customer relations, all of these things, but the main thing is complete on time and on budget and to the required quality. You keep focused on these things. I think on a major job, there'd be a big team there, and a large part of it is understanding the team, recognizing their strengths and weaknesses. Some managers need encouragement and others need criticism. It's a management exercise.
Well, let me just ask you about the team, because one of the issues that's cropped up in the evidence of other witnesses is the project managers who were appointed to run this project. Now, you mentioned Alan Seaborn, and we know he had assistants, Mary McLeod and Heather Griffin. They either had recent experience of administration or were really healthcare administrators. I just wondered whether you were able to form any view as to the capabilities of the project team that you were being asked to deal with.
No, it was primarily Alan was at my contact and interface, and occasionally his assistant, who is Peter
Moyer?
Peter Moyer, yes, his assistant if Alan was on holiday. These are the two, and very occasionally I met other people, but I couldn't remember their names.
And the other people you met, you thought were from Curry and Brown?
I might be wrong, but I think that was a company that they were employed by, the two I met.
But the Curry and Brown was certainly employed by the board. There was a Mr. Hall. I don't know whether that name rings any bells to you.
No, sorry, no.
That's fine.
But memory isn't what it was a few years ago.
And did you form any view about Mr. Seaborn and Mr. Moyer's strengths and weaknesses in the way that you just illustrated to us a few minutes ago?
I got the impression that Alan was a very focused kind of individual, and I thought I could see that he had loads of people to deal with, but I thought he was good at his job. I mean, my career has always been on the other side of the fence, so I'm coming out of the client side of the fence, so I still perceive him as being good at his job.
You mentioned a minute or two ago that you've become increasingly familiar with design and build as a concept towards the end of your working life. Could it become more popular? Is that right?
That's right, yes.
In the context of design and build, something called employer's requirements, or another word that means something similar, are they an important part of that process?
Yeah, very important, yes.
And had you any you may have answered this already, and if I ask you a question you've already answered, then I apologize, it's my fault, but were you given any understanding of what the employer's requirements were for this project?
No, no. I mean, I would imagine any previous hospital inquiries I've seen were vast, many pages, huge documents. So I was never asked to go and check or inspect the employer's requirements.
One of the issues that's cropped up, and tell me if you can help or not help on this, is that once you've got employers' requirements and the contractor gets these as part of the project and is told, well, go design, that design is your responsibility. Have you any experience of the kind of expertise that's needed to check that job is being done properly? So in other words, to check that what is produced meets the employer's requirements?
We would employ within our side, directly employ in Balfour Beatty people called services managers who would be experts in mechanical and electrical services, and they would check. And we would also have on board a team of mechanical and electrical designers, engineering designers, and architects, and each of them would check and make sure that things were as they should be.
I could understand that's what you would have as the design and build contractor in the example you've just given. What about on the client side? Because you've switched camps for this particular job. You're being asked to look at the process that's taking place from a client perspective. Did you get any understanding of what expertise was available to the client in this case?
No, I don't think I did. I just assumed that the consultants that the health board had employed were doing the job.
So that's not something you looked into at all?
No, I was liaising with Alan Seaborn, and if he confirmed to me that, or the Curry and Brown duo confirmed to me that things had been signed off as okay, approved, checked off, then I would accept their word that things had been signed off as correct. And somebody in the team was confirming that.
Right. So somebody told you things had been signed off, but you weren't sure who by.
No, it's not specifically because the person with Alan or the people from Curry and Brown were telling me something was done. I accepted their word that it was done. I think if I questioned every single aspect of the job and say, well, I doubt that, I want to go and check it, it was much more than one person could ever do.
Yeah, just so there's no doubt in your mind, the reason I'm asking these questions is that some of the areas that had to be signed off in a hospital can be quite technical. Ventilation is one that comes to mind.
Absolutely, yes.
So if something was being signed off on ventilation, who would you expect that to be done by from the client's perspective?
Normally the client would have, as we saw as contractors, we would normally see clients employing a mechanical and electrical consulting company, and they would check it off. But the majority of health boards had their own in-house experts for each specific trade or discipline. And they would also sign it off, so it required double signing. So say this is why it always proved very difficult to get these signed off, because there were so many people that had to tick a box to confirm it was done. And if I was told by Curry and Brown that, and I can remember looking at programs where I would ask, how's sign off, how's handover proceeding? Because handover doesn't happen in one day, it happens over dozens, hundreds of days. How's it proceeding? They would say, well, we've signed off 50 or 100 rooms or 200 rooms. And I take it when they said it's signed off, I assumed it was all checked and okay.
Thank you. Just moving on to another section. In the next section of your witness statement, you were asked about the board and governance structure, and you say you weren't really aware of reporting lines other than you understood the project director, and that for most of your time was Alan Seaborn, reported to the chief executive. That was your understanding.
I understood that, yeah.
And you then asked, well, what do you think of the sort of control, the governance structure that was in place on this project? And you say you didn't really know what the controls were. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I've been in construction contracting all my life, and making the jump to the client side of the fence, it was quite different. The structure of the governance within the health board. I have to say that, as a personal opinion, the boards are far too big, far too many people, 20 to 30 people around a table does not make for good management or running a business. And we would never have any more than 7 or 8 around the top table, if you like, to discuss things. And people would understand that's the way it was.
Thank you. Now, in the next section of your witness statement, you were asked whether you were involved in various issues, and a number of the issues you just said, no, I wasn't involved in this at all. I just wanted to ask you about the answer that you've given on page 73, where in relation to construction and design, you say you gave an overview of construction to the board's project manager on a regular basis. How was that overview given? Was it just orally, or was it written down somewhere or recorded?
It was a discussion, verbally discussed. I was never asked. This was a role I'd never been in before, so I had no knowledge of how the role was supposed to be carried out. I was an outsider coming into the health board, so it was very much a verbal discussion with Alan and other people in the project management office. There was no minuting. I discussed with him, discussed occasionally with Andrew Robertson how things were, but no formal reporting by me. I was an outsider within the board.
Well, I can understand how you've certainly come in from outside. I think we were just wondering if there was anywhere that we've missed where we might find, minutes or records of your reports, but the answer is they were all done orally. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I wrote maybe, I can remember writing 2 or 3 times about something to Robert Calderwood, the chief executive. But it was all verbal. Apart from what was reported at the board meetings, that was obviously reported and written down.
Okay, so when you say what was reported at the board meetings, was that you reporting?
No, Alan Seaborn reported, and I just, the chairman would generally ask if I agreed with what Alan was saying, if I had any comments to make. Generally, I didn't have any comments, or very minor ones, because I had already discussed with him what he was going to report.
The process that led to this hospital getting up and running had part of the exercise was a thing called the full business case, which basically had to go to the Scottish government for them to say okay, because that's where the money was coming from, broadly speaking. Were you involved in the preparation or presentation of the full business case?
Not at all.
One of the issues that we have Mr. Winter, is that most of the comments you have recorded are of a positive nature. Things are on track, words to that effect.
Yeah.
But we now know, with the benefit of hindsight, that there were some issues. So I need to ask you about these just to check what you do or do not know about any of them. If we go to page 74, we go to question 11. And you're basically asked there, do you know anything about any issues at all with either the water system or the ventilation system of the new hospital? Anyone raise these issues with you at all, or did you spot them yourself? Am I right in understanding the answer to that is no? You didn't know anything
No.
about?
No, nobody ever raised anything of that, to that level of detail about water systems and ventilation systems. And then when you're walking around the site, as a manager looking at progress, I think you would look at ventilation and see the ventilation ducting going up. And if it had been reported that it was 90% complete, you would kind of expect to see 90% of it up. But whether or not it was the correct diameter or size or number of air changes, these are the details you would expect managers on the contractor side and on the health board side to be making sure we're in order, that things were correctly done.
Now, the other question you asked on that page, near the foot of the page, is basically about testing, in particular testing of the water system. And you're asked, do you know anything about that? And you say you had no involvement apart from asking if all testing was progressing in accordance with the program. I take it you were given an answer to that question. Was it?
Yeah.
And what was that answer?
Again, it was positive, as I say. I think I'm correct in saying that of the many programs I was shown by the consultants, health board consultants, there were programs for a number of sign-offs, number of rooms, if you like, checked off to ensure that if you've got several thousand rooms, how many have been signed off as correct and how many are still to go. So that way you measure progress. And generally, they were given a tick. Yep, the number done seems to be online, on progress. And since it's signed off by the whole team, you've got to assume that it's been signed off as correct.
So when you asked, where are you with testing, and you're told, oh, we're up to this point, did you report on that to anyone, or did you just check that seemed to match what you saw?
No, I didn't report that specific to anyone. It was just part of what I'd been asked to do was overview progress and make sure that the progress being reported was actually reflected on site, that was what was happening. And that's what Alan was about to report to the board.
So am I right in understanding from the answers to these questions that by the time you finished your job with handover, you hadn't been told of any problems with either water or ventilation?
No, I can't remember some of these, but I can clearly remember everybody was delighted at the end, or the handover, that the job was complete on time and on budget, and everyone seemed happy with what had been done.
And when you say everyone, is that the project team you're talking about?
Yeah, the project team were happy. I think the board and everyone in the boardroom was equally happy that the whole thing had been achieved.
Can I just then move on and check what you do or do not know about some other things? We know here that a unit called the Beatson Bone Marrow Transplant Unit was decided at a reasonably late stage, 2013, was going to move into the new hospital. It hadn't been originally planned to be there, but the intention was to move it in and to do whatever was necessary to accommodate it. Did you know anything about that?
No, I can vaguely recall changes to the project as I went through. One of them was some rooms were being changed to something else, but I'm afraid I can't remember the detail of what that was.
So you can't help us with whether you ever looked at, you know, what the technical requirements were for that move, for instance?
No, I don't think that's something I would expect to be involved in. I would expect that that's why you employ a team of managers under you, designers, architects, and your own staff to do that kind of thing.
So you don't know what the, as it were, the specification of this unit was, and or how it was conveyed to the contractors. That's not something you were involved in.
No.
The reason, part of the reason I'm asking you about that ward in particular, which turned, I know when you were there half the time it would just be a shell of a building, but it turned into what was called Ward 4B, is that in Ward 4B, the patients appeared in June 2015 when the migration took place. And then not long after that, they upped and went again because those in charge were not happy with what was there. Now, that type of situation where a cohort of patients arrives for a ward and says, this is not up to scratch, we're off, to be a little colloquial about it. I think a number of witnesses have said that was highly unusual for that to happen. First of all, have you ever encountered that kind of situation in your previous experience of hospitals where basically the customer turned up for a particular ward and said, this is not good enough, we're not taking it?
No, because as I've said once or twice already, getting a hospital handed over it takes quite an effort from a contractor to get all the sign-offs done by all the appropriate people. I mean, there are the major sign-offs and there are very specialist sign-offs for things like medical gases, for example, where specialists are brought in to sign off. And to achieve that, it's very difficult to go and so to find out afterwards it wasn't correct, in inverted commas, would be quite a shock.
While we're talking about sign-offs, the inquiry's had a lot of evidence about something called validation, which is something supposed to be done by the client before they take the wards, particularly over ventilation systems. Were you involved in discussing that at all?
No, not at all.
Are you familiar with the general idea that under the HTMs and the SHTM, the contractor commissions everything and then the client does a validation to make sure it meets what they thought it was going to do?
Yes, that's right. That's quite common. I think that once it's completed again, if you like, by running the systems and transferring the operation of the systems to the client's own managers to validate that everything is working correctly and properly.
But you're not aware of anything being done about this on this project? You didn't encounter that issue, did you?
No, I don't recollect any issues regarding that.
The reason I ask, so there's no dubiety, is that the evidence the inquiry has is that validation wasn't done of the critical ventilation systems at handover. And I just wondered, given your overview role, whether you were aware of it at all.
Well, although that's a surprise to me that it was handed over if something hadn't been done. That's very unusual.
Okay, well, let's move on. We go to let's go to page 78 of your witness statement. Now, there's a heading on that page, Project Management Group, and you're asked about something called the Project Management Group, and then you say an answer that the only group you were really involved with was one with you, the project manager, and representatives from, let's just say, for the sake of argument, Curry and Brown. And you met approximately once a month.
Yeah,
And this gathering, this group, are we talking just 3 of you or 4 of you or 12 of you?
no, there'd be 2 or 3 from Curry and Brown. There'd be Alan and Peter sometimes together, or sometimes one. That would be half 5 or 6 at the most.
And you say it didn't report to anybody, this gathering. Why was that?
I think the reason I was there is because the board advertised for someone to fulfill this role. I was appointed to go and overview progress, which I did, and costs, which I did. That was the remit I was given, not to do anything else, and no one ever complained all the way through that I wasn't doing something they wanted done.
No, I'm not necessarily criticizing you. We're just trying to understand the way this thing worked, because we can hear from your evidence that there might have been, half a dozen people there or thereabouts, sometimes more, discussing issues on site. But there didn't seem to be any output, as it were, from that meeting. Nobody produces anything. Is that right?
I can see that. Looking back in hindsight now, maybe seems strange. But I think another factor I would ask to be taken into account was this was a new role, and having someone from a contractor stepping into a board at the highest level was, I think, quite a shock to some people in the health board, some other managers, that I was seen as a bit of an outsider, perhaps. So I had to take some time to develop relationships and tread a bit warily to begin with.
Can I ask whether in your time there you were ever made aware that a decision had been made to depart from the SHTM guidance on air changes?
I can't remember any discussion about that at all. But maybe I'd add something that may be of interest or use. As a contractor, when you're overviewing projects or tendering for projects, we would occasionally find differences between the HTMs and the client specification. And it was always hammered on us, just do what the specification asks. There was a conflict there, and if you went back to client and pointed out, we generally say, just do what's in the spec. So that there were conflicts, or occasionally there were conflicts on jobs.
Just so His Lordship understands what your point is, where did the conflicts arise?
But there was maybe a difference between what the HTMs asked for and maybe the client's own specific on client requirements slightly different. Which one to be priced for was quite often the question, and 99% of the time the answer was just price what's in the specification. That's the client's requirements. Sorry, it's just price what's in the client requirements.
Right.
That would seem to be an inevitable conclusion, because the contractor was offering to meet what the client wanted.
Correct.
And if that's what the client contracted for, that is presumably what you were obliged to provide.
Yes, that's correct. So generally the response was just do what's in the client requirements. Just because if you didn't, you could have one contractor who maybe hadn't spotted the HTM differences, or maybe he would quote and do something in line with the HTMs, and another contractor would do something in accordance with the client's own requirements. So it was usually stick to the client requirements was the norm.
Can I just come back to a point I asked you a little earlier? So apologies for going in the odd circle, Mr. Winter.
Okay.
It's mentioned on page 78. The evidence we've had here is that during the early stages of design, when the employer's requirements were being put together and so on, the board had Curry and Brown as their advisors, and then Curry and Brown had a suite of sub-consultants, architects, planners, M&E engineers, and so on. A little like what you explained to us earlier was often the case for the contractor, that you had a suite of specialists in different areas available to you. But essentially when the contract was signed at the end of 2009, just shortly after that, these sub-consultants were largely stood down. So they weren't being employed on a day-to-day basis anymore. So I'm just wondering whether you have any view, based on your contacts with the project team and Curry and Brown, did you have any visibility of who is providing what you might describe as technical advice behind the people you're meeting?
No, I had no knowledge of that. I think I had only fairly recently joined the board at that point in time. So that the whole setup within this board or any board was kind of new to me. But I was never made aware of how the team was to work or get things done or supervised or signed off. So I say my remit from Andros was the project on site, visit the site and see how progress is down there. The reference to documentation, pre-contract, was not part of my brief.
Okay, let me ask you something else then. Page 79. I can put the minute up on the screen if we need it. We may not need it. There's a minute in 2012 saying the NHS team required an updated inspection look-ahead programme for a forthcoming visit by you. Now, do you know what an inspection look-ahead programme is?
Yeah, it's probably something I referred to earlier on, where programs would be marked up to show perhaps a number of rooms to be inspected and signed off. You've obviously got the past, how many have been signed off in the past, but you may have a program looking ahead to see what has to be achieved to meet the handover date. So you're looking ahead to what is required to be done, to give you some idea of how it needs resourcing.
Now, you also asked about something called the Performance Review Group. Am I right in understanding from your witness statement that you really don't have any clear recollection of your involvement with that group or sitting in meetings of that group?
That's right. It was only when I was reminded of it that it came to mind that I did attend that group. It wasn't something that's clear in my memory. I still don't have much recollection of it.
So that's still you've been reminded about it, but you still don't have much recollection of being on that group or what you did there.
No, I couldn't recall any of the particular meetings or discussions. No.
Now you're asked questions. If we go now to page 80 of your witness statement, running on to 81. You're asked a question by the inquiry team at the foot of page 80, which is basically, would you have expected that the decision to build this very large new hospital with a ventilation system that didn't meet, it didn't meet SHTM. If SHTM was part of the employer's requirements, it didn't meet the employer's requirements. And the question is, would you have expected that kind of decision to go up the tree to the, well, there's a very long name, the NSGHLPEB, and then there's the performance review group, and then there's the board itself. And your first part of your answer is design was not in your remit. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And then you say, well, if there had been such a decision, you would have expected to go through appropriate approvals. So with something like that, what kind of level would you expect it to be approved at?
Yeah, I think clearly there could be any number of reasons, as I've said, why the things would change. It could be from a simple thing like moving a door or changing a door position to changing the ventilation system. And depending how big an issue it was, would probably depend on how the level of seniority of the person that would become involved. I mean, on any given day, there are probably hundreds of decisions and changes made on a project of this size. Lots will be signed off by, or not signed off, but approved or agreed by management at a much lower level. But fairly major issues would be elevated up the tree, maybe even as far as the project manager.
Well, if we just go back one step then, assuming a decision was taken not to build the vast majority of the rooms in the new hospital, hundreds of them, in accordance with the SHTM air change requirements. From your experience, where would you expect a decision like that to go for sign-off?
Yeah, I would expect that would be at the pretty high, very high level. There's a chances are that that kind of change, or if there was a change, would incur a great deal of cost. So people would be seriously interested in it. So that, at the highest level, to answer your question, I would expect that to go to.
But just so I understand your answer properly, that's because you think it might have a connection to costs rather than because it's departing from guidance.
Well, I think maybe the two run together. You don't, I said earlier that generally most clients insisted that you build to their requirements, not to any other thing. So you'd want to make absolutely sure you had signatures to approve any deviation or change to things that they were not right.
One of the other topics you were asked about was something called the Quality Performance Committee. And again, do I understand that you now have little recollection of your role on the Quality Performance Committee?
That's correct, yeah.
You say on page 81, in the answer to question 24, you were solely concerned with overall progress and cost. That's essentially what you've been telling us today, is that right?
That's correct, yep.
And then you go on page 82 to go back to the fact that there were regular meetings between you and the project manager and so on. Sorry, let me rephrase that question. During those meetings, were you challenging the board's manager and advisors to go back to the word that was used when you were first appointed?
Yes, I think it wasn't just part of the discussion was to challenge and question. If they were saying something, I'd say, well, are you sure? I don't quite see it that way. I don't quite see, I think the contractor's struggling a bit on concrete works, and he's struggling a bit on something else. How is he going to recover that time? So it was challenging, yes.
Well, I don't have much more to ask you, but I want to take you to the end of your witness statement, page 83. Now, we are sitting here years after the event with the benefit of much hindsight and piles of evidence from lots of witnesses. So we're in a different position to somebody on site at the time. But you say in answer to question 28, this project was well managed and controlled by the board's project manager, contractor, and the team of advisors. Now, I'm going to come back to the well managed point in a minute. But when you refer to team of advisors, who are you referring to there?
To the people from Curry and Brown that I spoke to on a monthly basis.
Now, we know with the benefit of the hindsight that we have that Ward 4B, basically the customers voted with their feet and went away while things were done. And we also know that subsequently Ward 2A, which was the Children's Hospital bone marrow transplant area, had its water systems and ventilation completely rejigged. I'm just using that as a neutral term. It's not a construction term, but basically things were stripped out and redone some years after because of dissatisfaction with what had been provided.
Yeah.
Did you have any inkling that these kind of problems were going to arise?
No, none at all. As you say, given what we know of what's happened since then, that might sound strange, but I think I said earlier that at the end, when it was announced or we became aware that the project had been completed on time and on budget, give or take a few pounds, on time and on budget, and given the track record of some other major projects, months behind, years behind, and millions over budget, I think everyone was pretty well delighted with the outcome. And nobody flagged up to me, and in my time at the board, I never heard anyone say anything negative about the completion.
Well, given what we know now, I wonder if I could just ask you a couple of things to get the benefit of your experience while you're with us. If we have we have a project that's basically on time and on budget. These are very positive things to report for the reasons you've explained to us, and credit needs to be given for that. But we also have a project which had these issues that I've explained to you. And in fact, the board is on record as saying, I don't need to get into the technicality, but they were disappointed. They didn't think they'd got the hospital that they had anticipated getting, of the qualities and so on that they anticipated. So you've got a bit of a contrast there. And I wanted to ask you, given your experience, can you help us at all as to how somebody of your caliber at the time could have been perhaps better used? Are there things that would have been, with a benefit of hindsight, can you suggest things that could be done better or different? Because obviously the inquiry is looking at trying to avoid these things happening again.
Yeah. That's a big question. I think there was a benefit to doing what I did, which was a very broad overview, to go into much more detail on any of the aspects of the design or signing off for inspections. you might need more than one person. You know, it's a huge project with thousands of people working on it, hundreds of subcontractors. On any given day, there are 1,000 questions being asked and answered. You know, and allowing someone to delve into every one of these would be a mighty task. And I suppose the board maybe felt or they had everything in place that they needed to run this project. I'm sorry I'm not coming up with an answer for you. I could maybe think about that if you wanted, but sorry I can't give you an answer to that right now.
Well, I think these are all the questions that I have for Mr. Winter.
I wonder if you can help me on a number of points, Mr. Winter. You took up your role, the role that you've described, when you joined the board, I think in the latter part of 2009, is that right?
Yeah,
And you remained in that role until the handover of the hospital at the beginning of 2015.
yes, that's correct.
Right. Now, during that period, first of all, there was a period of just about a year when the design was being reviewed. Am I right?
I think that's just after I joined the board, yeah.
Yes. Possibly from just after December 2009 until I think about November, December 2010. Now, in that period, what was your understanding of the services which Curry and Brown were providing to GGC?
Well, at this point in time, I was a newcomer to the board, an outsider as a contractor coming into an organisation that had been the other side of the fence for all my life. I knew that these discussions with the contractor, different contractors and designers had been ongoing for years, several years, bringing this to the point, almost to the point of appointing a contractor. So I didn't feel it was right that I should come in here right at the last minute and leap in asking questions and inquiring as to what someone's role was or who was doing different things. And secondly, it wasn't what I was asked to do anyway. So I don't have much I can add to what was happening within the board at that point.
Did you make any assumptions as to what services Curry and Brown were providing?
No, I knew from my contracting experience, I knew the name Curry and Brown as being a very large and well-respected company. And I kind of assumed they'd be performing the normal project manager, project consultant services that you find on any contract. And everyone is slightly different. Every health board employs different consultants in different roles. But I saw the name there and thought, oh, well, they're using Curry and Brown. That's normal. That's nothing unusual to provide a service.
Can I approach, or can I ask really a different question? Did your experience with Balfour and Beatty include in design and build contracts of a comparable size to the New South Glasgow Hospitals project?
Yes, I think just before I left Balfour Beatty, we were involved in Birmingham New Hospital, which I think is maybe slightly larger than Glasgow. UCLH in London was a £150 million project. Blackburn, was 70, 80 million. So that they were very large projects. Glasgow was certainly a standout in terms of size. Yeah, one of the biggest, probably as big, if not bigger, than most of the hospital contracts we did.
And were these design and build contracts?
Yeah, by that stage, we had moved, by the time hospital building was booming, we went into the PFI era. So these were all PFI, which meant design and build, yeah.
Now, and would they have design review periods within that contract arrangement?
Yes, things that you would have the tendering process to go through, where you would have a fairly well developed design. But once you're appointed as a preferred contractor, you then have to refine that design and refine all that's the design of architectural design, engineering design, M&E design. That all had to be refined and approved before you could get the contract signed.
Now, you were involved in these contracts clearly from the contractor's side, but in particular during the design review process with these large hospital contracts, what M&E support would you expect the client to have available to it?
I would expect the client to have on board a virtual another image of what we as contractor. We'd have an architect, a structural engineer, and an M&E engineer as a basic, plus various other specialities. And you would expect that to be matched on the client side. You would expect to find the client would have a match for all the team you had. And they would discuss things and agree and would get sign off.
Right, can I take that list at dictation speed from you? I think the first specialist service you would expect would be an architect. Is that right?
Yeah, architect, yes.
I missed the next one on your list.
Structural engineer.
Structural engineer. I think the third one was an M&E engineer.
M&E engineer.
I missed the next one on your list.
The next one was just a general comment. There are various subspecialties, very specialist areas that you'd have someone on. We always had someone, I'm trying to recall now, a company in who would refine the relationships between rooms and the layout. Apart from the architect, they would have a knowledge of what room required to be situated next to another room. Basically, hospital specialist people.
Yeah.
Advise on layouts and comment on the architect's interpretation.
Right. Is the word that I'm probably searching for a healthcare planner?
Yes, that's a healthcare planner. Those kind of people.
Thank you, Mr. Winter. That's the last of the questions I want to ask. Mr. Connell, does that give rise to anything?
It doesn't give rise to anything on my part, my lord. I just wanted to double check that what you were saying, Mr. Winter, was in effect that you would expect from your experience of these contracts that the client, as it were, I think you used the word mirrored what you had. If you had an electrical engineering specialist, you'd find that they probably had one as well, and so on.
Yes. Yep, that's
That correct?
Correct.
Beyond that, I have nothing further, my lord. So it's
Right.
purely a question of checking for
Checking.
other questions.
Mr. Winter, what Mr. Connell would now wish to do is check with the other legal representatives in the room as to whether there's any other questions arising. That shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. Probably, I think I probably have to ask you to stay where you are. It may be that our technical people shut off the screen, but I'm anxious not to lose contact with you. Mr. Connell, do you have any technical input to?
I don't have any technical input, but clearly if we could put the screen off and ask Mr. Winter not to engage in conversation that we can otherwise overhear just for the next few minutes, but stay where you are, that'll let us do this fairly quick check. That'd be very helpful.
Okay, no problem.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Winter. As I say, hope to be back with you in about 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Yep.
Mr. Connell.
Thank you, my lord. There were no questions from the room. I just wanted to make one point to finish your evidence, Mr. Winter. In the experience of many of the people in this room, getting a project of this scale through on time and on budget is a considerable achievement. Would that be your experience from your time in construction?
Yes, although I have to say that I'm perhaps biased, but I think most of the ones we did were on time and on budget, but I would say that. But it's not usual for the construction industry or any industry to complete things on time and on budget.
But I have nothing further to add, Mark.
Right. Mr. Winter, thank you very much for your evidence this afternoon and for the preparation that went behind it. I'm grateful for the help you've provided to the inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're now free to sign off.
Right, okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Connell, you are resuming tomorrow.
With Mr. Hill, followed by Mr. Jenkins.
Right. Well, if I can wish everyone a good afternoon, and all being well, we'll see each other tomorrow at 10. Stand.